Hi boys and girls. Today I bring you a new AskReddit ProRevange story. I hope you enjoy. Subscribe for more. What is the greatest fuck it, I'll do it myself in history? In 1947 a guy named Thor Heyerdahl was trying to prove his theory that the Polynesian islands were settled by people from South America, not Asia. Nobody believed him because it was thought that crossing such a large ocean with the technology they had back then was impossible. So he decides to build a boat using only the tools and materials available at the time these migrations took place. And then he sailed that boat across the Pacific Ocean, nearly dying in the process, but ultimately making it to the Polynesian islands. Thor Heyerdahl was a bit of a madman. He also tried to prove that the ancient Egyptians could have crossed the Atlantic Ocean by rebuilding one of their boats and, well, sailing across. It took 2 tries, but they did it. It's still pretty unlikely that the Egyptians actually did sail across the Atlantic, but it's neat to know that they could have. Jonas Salk needed human subjects to test his polio vaccine. That's normally a long process and he wanted to make the vaccine available as quickly as possible, so he just experimented on himself. In 1888, Alman Brown Strowger, an undertaker, noticed he was losing a lot of business to the other undertaker in town. He found out that the other undertaker's wife was a telephone operator, and when she intercepted people asking to be connected to Strowger's funeral home, the operator would route the call to her husband's funeral home instead. 3 years later, Strowger patented the automatic teller exchange, a system that allowed telephone users to make calls without the need for human operators, single-handedly destroying an entire workforce. Imagine being so pissed off you don't just get someone fired, but remove their job from existence entirely. Cliff Stahl, the cuckoo's egg, noticed weird traffic on his university servers. No one believed him that there was any risk occurring. Ended up uncovering a major hacking attempt to steal missile designs and basically created internet security. I think it was missile designs. It's been a long time. Otis invented pretty much what we consider the modern elevator. Nobody was convinced it was safe, so he hoisted himself up extremely high and had somebody cut the cable with an axe to prove how confident he was that the elevator was safe regardless of almost worst case scenarios. Donald Knuth is one of the big names in computer science. Back in the 1960s, he set out to write the definitive texts on computer programming and analysis of algorithms. The first 3 volumes came out, and he started the 4th in the early/mid 1970s. He was unhappy with how the newer printing/editions were typeset, and so he took a summer to solve that problem. A decade later the 4th volume still had not been completed, but as a consolation prize we got TeX, later extended to the more commonly used LaTeX. Without question the most comprehensive and powerful language for creating documents with heavy technical requirements. It is a strange mix of a markup language like HTML and a compiled language like C. It is completely free and has been for well over 30 years and is probably the most bug-free piece of software I've ever seen. Certainly, for its size and scope, there's not much out there of comparable quality. There is literally no mathematics that cannot be properly typeset in text/latex. Its default style is instantly recognizable to any working mathematician. It is used across nearly all STEM fields and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of journals that only accept manuscripts written in LaTeX. It wasn't until the early 2000s that drafts of the 4th volume started to appear. Nobody has seemed to mind. Leo Major. He liberated an entire village from Nazis by himself. He's one of the handfuls of super badass soldiers you sometimes hear about from WW2. Jon Snow, not that one, the father of epidemiology. No one believed him that the cholera outbreak in what is now Soho was because of a contaminated water pump. He broke it. They arrested him for vandalism and held him until the outbreak suddenly ended. Jon Snow's entire life story is a series of fuck it, I'll do it myself moments. From his mother getting the money to send him to school, to basically the entirety of his work against cholera. Because all his life it was always you know nothing, Jon Snow. That made me laugh, but then I realized Jon Snow spent most of the show trying desperately to convince people of an invisible threat and being persecuted because of it. Martine Rothblatt, founder of SiriusXM and unbelievable polymath, was told her daughter Genesis had 3 months to live. She had been diagnosed with a type of pulmonary arterial hypertension which was fatal. The disease causes too much pressure in the blood vessels leading from the heart to the lungs, causing them to narrow and not carry enough oxygen. So Rothblatt quit all of her other work and went to the library to save her daughter. Even though she had zero background in the field, she figured out a cure and in the process founded United Therapeutics, which is a billion-dollar biotechnology company. Rothblatt's life story is amazing. Probably the time Nando Parrado and Roberto Canessa decided they couldn't wait around any longer and legged it for 10 days across the Andes with no warm clothes, climbing gear, or food except some scraps of their dead friends stuffed into a sock. They finally found someone out in the middle of nowhere, Sergio Catalan, who rode horseback all night and then took a bus to get some help. The mountain climbers had come from the wreckage of a crashed plane that everyone had been looking for over 2 MOs. They needed help for the other survivors who were injured and starving. They saved 14 of their friends. There's a book written about it by one of the survivors himself. Miracle in the Andes. 72 Days on the Mountain and Mile-Long Trek Home by Nando Parrado. I never watched the movie, but the book still gets me to this day. It is one of the most disturbing depictions of humans' ability to survive even under the deadliest circumstances. A really humbling read, reminding us of our own fragility and how terrible fleeting everything truly is. Brian Acton interviewed at Facebook and got turned down. He said fuck it and built WhatsApp. Several years later, Facebook bought WhatsApp for $19 billion. Here is his tweet from 2009, the day he interviewed. I'm getting this framed for my desk at work. Maurice Heilmann invented over 40 vaccines during his career in the pharmaceutical industry. In 1963 his oldest daughter caught the mumps. He cultured a sample from her, developed a vaccine, and injected it into his younger daughter. That vaccine is still in use and has saved millions of lives. In total, it's estimated that his work has saved 118 million lives globally, and because he used it on his daughter, it is to this day the fastest any effective vaccine has ever been produced. Fun fact, this vaccine is also the fastest ever to be made in history, from start to finish taking only 4 years from the beginning of development to the first distribution. This is also why it is unlikely that we will get a vaccine faster than a year for the current epidemic. Canadian soldier Leo Major and his friend Willie Arsenault were scouting a Dutch town called Zwolle that had been captured by Germans in WW2. On this scouting trip, the two had decided to liberate Zwolle together, but were spotted and Arsenault was killed. Major, enraged, killed 2 Germans, while the rest fled. On the outskirts of the town, Major intercepted a vehicle, disarming the soldiers there, and told one soldier that all the Canadian artillery would be firing on the town in the morning. That night, Major decided to single-handedly liberate the town. Arming himself with many weapons, he made explosions and noise, making it sound like the entire Canadian army was there. Several times that night, Major went back and forth from Zwolle to the Canadian base, taking 8 to 10 German prisoners. At one point, Major located the Gestapo headquarters and raided it himself. He killed several SS officers and the rest fled. By morning, Major discovered that the Germans who had taken Zwolle had entirely retreated. I should also mention that Major was a sniper who had only one eye from a phosphorus grenade explosion years prior and remained in the military because he insisted he only needed one eye to aim his weapon, and that to him, he looked like a pirate. The Dutch town of Zwolle was liberated by a one-eyed sniper. He has several other legendary acts, but this to me was his best. Continue to watch. The best is still to come. It's gotta be Amo Koivunen. He was a Finnish soldier in the Second World War. When the Finns were trying to reclaim land from the Soviets, he got separated from his unit mid-war in the middle of nowhere. He was the one tasked to carry the drugs they held in case of injury or tiredness, one of which was Pervitin, which was literal meth in a tablet form, instead of just taking 1 or 2. He downed the whole bottle and went on a weeks-long method up rampage. He got hit by a landmine, evaded Soviet soldiers, caught a bird, and ate it raw, all while on skis. He finally made it back, to finish lines where on arrival, he weighed only 90 pounds or so and had a heart rate of 200 beats per minute. He ended up living for another 45 years. Not a very old story. Manchi, or the mountain man, lived in a very remote village of India whose route to nearby was blocked a mountain, and hence villagers had to climb it every time. And they had to do that daily to get essential supplies. During one of these trips, his wife fell down the mountain. He loved her a lot. He tried first to persuade the gov to do a mountain tunnel project there, but to vain. So he went on alone to break the entire mountain with just an axe. He did that for 10 plus years and finally succeeded. There is a Bollywood movie on him too. Title: Manchi, the Mountain Man. I'm surprised no one's mentioned Catherine the Great of Russia. She decided her husband was useless, which, granted, he was, and proceeded to set up a military coup to overthrow him. Even with the plan being discovered early, she dressed in military garb and marched with her new army, which had just sworn loyalty to her, down to Peter's palace, where he was forced to resign the throne, all without a single drop of bloodshed. At least until Peter turned up dead sometime later under shady circumstances. But honestly, for a military coup it was pretty non-violent. If saying "fuck it, I'm ruling Russia myself" isn't great, I don't know what is. I mean, it's right there next to her name for a reason. It's incredible, especially considering A. She's a lady. B. She wasn't Russian. C. She wasn't originally Russian Orthodox. James Clerk Maxwell was idolized by Einstein as being the father of modern physics. Not only did he formulate the classical theory of electromagnetic radiation, but just for shits and giggles, he calculated exactly what Saturn's rings were made from using pure mathematics. It wasn't until Voyager 1 and 2 passed by and took photos in the early 80s did we get confirmation that Maxwell was right. He then calculated how to take a color photograph in 1855. This was then achieved in 1861 and is recognized as the first ever color photograph. Nikola Tesla was tasked with lighting up the World's Fair, but Thomas Edison wouldn't allow him to use any of his patents, so Tesla had to invent a new light bulb that didn't use any of Edison's patents and could still have thousands made in time for the event. Desmond Doss single-handedly saved from 50 to 100 men up on Hacksaw Ridge in Okinawa. His company was ordered to retreat when they were attacked by the Japanese, but instead he said nah, stayed up on the ridge alone, unarmed, and dragged as many soldiers as he could to safety without any help. Even when he was shot by a sniper and riddled with shrapnel, he made sure they took another guy down the hillside before him. Edit: I'm aware there is a movie. I've read about him before, and I know he's done more than just what is in the movie. I just didn't want to make a 3,000 word post about the many ways this guy is amazing. Perhaps when no one believed Barry Marshall that H. pylori can cause stomach ulcers, so he thought to screw it, I'll test it on myself, and ended up getting the Nobel Prize. Edit: wow, I did not expect this to get so many upvotes. Also thank you, folks, for the Bo Awards. However, I feel it's necessary to point out that Robin Warren, the co-winner of the Nobel Prize, has actually done most of the work for the discovery, but Marshall got all the attention well, because of doing this. Thank you /Raymeal01 for reminding us. When Nintendo turned down a collab with Sony, then Sony said, fuck it, we'll do it ourselves. The rest is history. To be fair, I think it's great they did. Nintendo and Sony are so different, there's plenty of room for both. When Julius Caesar decided to just up and fucking march into Rome to declare himself the military leader, or how about his Rhine bridges that he built in a few days to cross an army over a river, then went back over and demolished it just because his army could. It's said the Germanic tribes saw his army do this and basically shit themselves. Imagine being some nomadic tribe and an invading force comes to a river, builds an entire bridge, crosses it, shits in your land, and then goes back home and destroys the entire bridge all in less than a week. Juan Pujol Garcia was a Spaniard who created his own counterintelligence operation for the Allies during WW2. Initially, he approached British and American intelligence to offer them his services, but both countries rebuffed him. Undeterred, Garcia created a fictional persona as a pro-fascist Spanish official and got himself recruited by the Nazis, who directed him to travel to Britain to recruit agents. Instead, Garcia created a network of fictitious agents and sub-agents using publicly available information like newspapers and travel brochures. It was at this point that he again contacted Allied intelligence, and he was finally recruited. Garcia continued his work throughout the war, and for the same operation, he received both a knighthood from the British and the Iron Cross from Nazi Germany. The Nazis never realized that he was a double agent. Yes. In the lead up to Overlord, he confirmed reports that the Allied attack would come from Dover and wouldn't attack Normandy. Then, at the last moment, he confirmed that the Allies, in fact, would attack Normandy. But it was too late for the Nazis to act on it. So afterward the Nazis still trusted him, as they would point to him and say he was the only one who predicted the Normandy invasion. It was technical issues, as always, that meant the data got to us late. Henry VIII couldn't get his way with the Pope, so he made the Church of England, so he could do what he wanted. This man legit made his own damn religion, which millions still follow today, just so he could cheat on his wife. Edit. He was already cheating on his wife. He wanted to divorce her to marry his mistress. A man who was a tractor mechanic company owner made a good chunk of money and bought a Ferrari. He felt that the car wasn't as good as it could be, and it wasn't very comfortable, so he brought his complaints all the way to Enzo Ferrari, the owner of the company. Enzo insulted the man, saying a mere tractor mechanic didn't know how to make a sports car. That sparked a rivalry that lasts to this day. That man was Ferruccio Lamborghini, tractor mechanic, Italian manufacturing magnate. Lamborghini tractors are still produced, although not by the car company. During the American Revolution, John Paul Jones sailed over to England to burn down British naval ships. He succeeded, of course, and made back safely. After the revolution, he was even pardoned by the town that he burned most of the ships in. And then he met Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, and the rest is history. Clara Lemlich took the stage at a union meeting in 1909 to declare a general strike after the older male union leaders told the working girls that there really wasn't a point in striking and it would be too hard. Just be patient and deal with it. So 20-year-old Clara interrupts them, climbs up on the stage, and shouts at the crowd that she's tired of just talk. Time to strike, and everyone went for it. Instant agreement of the workers. Wow, this got some attention. So editing to add that I dug up my old research. A translation of what she said, originally in Yiddish, was I have listened to all the speeches, and I have no further patience for talk. I too have worked and suffered, and I'm tired of talk. I move that we go on a general strike. Now. George Clooney bought his own spy satellite to prove the alleged crimes of African warlords, because nobody else would. He bought satellite time, not an entire spy satellite. Alexander the Great solving the Gordian, not by cutting it with his sword. Alexander loved to do things like this. During the Malian campaign near the end of his conquests, his army was besieging a citadel. Alexander thought the battle was taking too long, so he took a ladder, climbed up the citadel wall himself, and suicidally jumped over the wall into the heart of the enemy garrison. He sustained awful injuries during this battle, but perhaps in part due to his recklessness, his army was able to complete the siege of the citadel. Thank you for watching. Tell me which one was your favorite. Like, subscribe and hit that notification bell for more. The next video will be even more interesting. You are a legend.